Hey, oh my gosh. I'm so thrilled to have all of you here today. Welcome to this event that we are co-hosting with the YouTube podcast team. Before we begin, hello, my name is Elsie Escobar. I am the Director of Community and Content for Libsyn. And I'm so thrilled. First of all, I want to shout out a few of the countries that have signed up for this event: Japan, the Netherlands, Sweden, Romania, South Africa, Israel, Colombia, Brazil, Spain, Dominican Republic, and at least 15 other countries. Shout out, folks. So let us know where you're coming from today in the chat. For those of you in Australia, if you're here live, God bless you. I hear it's 4 a.m. your time, so you are really committed. Anyway, I am so honored to have the YouTube podcast team here today. We have Erica Kornbluh, Strategic Partner Manager, and we have Emma Sweet, Global Product Activation Manager, here today. Thank you so much for you two coming in here and chatting with all our people. Look at them all. Hello from all the places. Goodness gracious. Yay for international. Now, I'm going to address a few housekeeping issues before we begin. So we are going to have a Q&A at the end of this event. So before you ask any questions, please add a Q and a colon so that we can easily search and share your questions. We're going to be keeping an eye out for that. So Q and colon in the comment section. We're hoping to drop all relevant links mentioned in the chat, right? And we have team members both from Libsyn and YouTube in the chat. So hopefully they'll be able to answer some questions in there as there is communication. So keep an eye on them. Now, there is a possibility that we might go over for no longer than 10 minutes today after the hour. So there will be a recording, which is a question that keeps on coming up again. Same link, this one that you're watching us in now, just come later on when you have time to finish it all up. And lastly, we do events like this all the time over here. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel to see what we have going on, and any of our other social handles. If you don't happen to be on YouTube very much, find us over at Libsyn, Libsyn. All right. So on that note, I am going to pass it off to Erica and Emma to take over and start this moving forward, because we have so much to share with you. All right. Take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Elsie. My name is Erica Kornbluh, and as Elsie said, I'm a Strategic Partner Manager here at YouTube. Thank you so much for joining this training. We're so excited to be here, and it's really amazing to see all of the interest and excitement really in this product we both launched and continue to expand. Before I begin, I want to see a sound off in the comments. Who here already has a produced podcast? Don't be shy.
Don't be shy, y'all. This is when you get it. I know you guys always love to talk about your own podcast. So this is the time to let them know about yours in the chat. And here we go.
Love it. I'm seeing them coming in. Wonderful.
Look all the yes.
Yeah, a lot of them. So my follow-up question is going to be, who already has it published onto YouTube? Oh, people giving their handles. I love to see it.
I know. Isn't that nice? We'll just be like following up, man. Following up.
To check all these out. Great. Okay. So if you didn't, post in the comments just now, I imagine the rest of you are interested in learning more about podcasting on YouTube. A couple more comments coming in. Okay, great. So all of you are in the right place. Today, myself and Emma will be sharing more with you about podcasts on YouTube. And as Elsie said, we will be opening up the floor for Q&A at the end of the session. I would say hold most of your questions if you can until then, just because we might already go through it by the end of the presentation. But if it's top of mind and you don't want to forget, as Elsie said, a Q and a colon, and we'll get back to you at the end. Wonderful. So here's a quick overview of the agenda. and then I will dive right into it. So, podcasting is evolving, and podcasters on YouTube are really at the forefront of all of this change. So, no longer are fans only interested in hearing what your podcasters have to say, but they really want to see these conversations taking place so they can feel like they're in the room with you. Many users, particularly those in Gen Z, use YouTube to watch podcasts and deepen their engagement with their favorite shows. YouTube is now an established podcast destination with creators like Bailey Sarian, who's pictured in this slide, using YouTube to build out these multi-format experiences. And it's also becoming increasingly evident that creators are getting involved in podcasts to talk about things that really matter to them and are important to them. And as a result, they're becoming thought leaders in really whatever it is they are talking about. So, another great example of a creator using YouTube to build out these multi-sensory viewing experiences is Rotten Mango. Stephanie's True Crime podcast is available in both audio and video, just on different platforms. And I imagine most of you on the call are really experts in audio. That's your bread and butter. So you may be wondering why video podcasts are so popular. So for hosted shows on really any topic, seeing the host's face helps form a bond between the host and the viewer and leads to better information recall. When looking at an interview show with guests, video allows viewers to see these real-life interactions between the host and the guest, which makes the experience a lot more personal. Then there are sports and news podcasts, and being able to see the actual highlight or news clip being discussed on screen rather than just listening to it makes everything you're listening to, become more memorable. And then even true crime podcasts, again, like Rotten Mango, which are more narrative in structure, they can still benefit from visual elements to make the experience a lot more rich. So in the true crime example, you could show, let's say, evidence, court documents, and other visual aids to bring the story to life. And I think, the numbers here for Rotten Mango really speak for themselves. So with podcasts thriving in both video and audio, whether you're watching at home or really listening on the go, we want YouTube to be the place where you can find whatever it is you're looking for. So bridging the gap between audio and video is what we like to call the next frontier in podcasting. So think about it. Let's say you're listening to your favorite podcast on your desktop at home on YouTube, but you have to go hop in the car to pick your kids up from school or run an errand. You'd have to get into your car, likely open up another podcasting app, find the episode, find the show, fast forward to the specific time code, even having to remember the exact time code it was that you left off on, and find that point within the podcast. This can take a pretty long time. Then later, let's say you wanted to pick back up on desktop again or even on your TV, you'd have to do this process all over again, which, again, pretty timely and annoying. So with seamless integration and transition between YouTube Music and YouTube Main, we've made this complicated multi-step audio to video process so much simpler and easier. We plan to continue to build new features to become an even better place for podcasts in service of bridging this audio video gap with one button easy transitions. So let's zoom out for a second just to discuss YouTube. As I'm sure you all know, and these are numbers that are very publicly available, YouTube is one of the largest digital content platforms in the world. We have over 2 billion monthly logged in users, so YouTube really can provide you with access to a vast global audience. I mean, we see that audience already here today in this session, which is awesome. And YouTube is one of the most popular platforms for US listeners to consume podcasts, and we're only continuing to grow globally. So in addition to being the largest one of the largest podcast platforms in the world, YouTube is also the most frequently used by new podcast audiences. Studies, such as the one from Cumulus Media, highlight how YouTube is a key location for new to podcasting users to discover podcasts. And as you can see here too, 43% of weekly podcast listeners in the US say that YouTube is one of the services they use when listening to podcasts. Just wanted to take a look at some additional stats here. So as you can see, 84% of Gen Z monthly podcast listeners ever listen to or watch podcasts with video. So Gen Z is really leading the charge here. 37% of podcast listeners prefer to consume podcasts with video, and 40% of people that are new to podcasts prefer it with video. So as you can see, the numbers are already there, and they only really seem to be trending upwards. So I'm sure you're wondering now why YouTube and maybe even how YouTube has brought podcasters such success. So, one of the key things that we hear from podcasters is how YouTube can help them find a brand new audience. We've seen this in third party studies, but we also hear it directly from partners. So, as you can see here, ESPN recently discussed how they found that since bringing their podcast content to YouTube, they haven't seen any type of impact on their numbers across other platforms and podcatchers. And they found that they're reaching a new audience in entirety with their YouTube presence. You're probably now wondering, how can that be? So, our scale combined with our search and discovery capabilities helps bring these new eyes to your content in an organic nature. Historically, podcast discovery has been pretty limited, with listeners relying on word of mouth, like your friend telling you, go ahead, come listen to this new episode or new podcast, or the top chart lists. As you all know, marketing shows can be extremely expensive, and user to user sharing isn't optimal due to people using different platforms and platform paywalls and these high switching costs. So this is where YouTube is really beneficial. As the second largest search engine in the world, again, I know that's something you've probably already heard, but our search capabilities and recommendation algorithms help you reach more people interested in your content. User-to-user sharing is really powerful and easy. You can text a URL, bookmark, playlist, social, and various link embeds to really get your URL out there in the way you want. And our clipping features also allow you to drop users straight into specific parts of your podcast that interest them the most, with clips even appearing in search. So now let's take a look at YouTube's content ecosystem as a whole and how it all connects. So while we know that discovery can happen at multiple touch points, we are seeing an abundance of discovery happening in shorts. So outside of YouTube, podcasters are posting their short form clips separately from where the viewers are consuming the actual podcast. Again, this makes the bridge between short form and long form pretty difficult. But on YouTube, we see that users' discovery on shorts, both from trends and finding their favorite creators' content, leads into long form streams and views on YouTube Music and YouTube Main. On the flip side of that, when a fan becomes attached to a certain podcast, we also see affinity translate into shorts creation and participation, starting this loop all over again, which you can see on the slide. And as YouTube, as we continue to grow as a platform here, and as the podcast product continues to grow and evolve, this diagram will evolve alongside with it. And I'm sure we'll be back with you in a few months or a year, whenever it may be, to go through the updates there. So I also want to call out this audience study where we learn again that Gen Z audiences have expressed a habit of using short form content to help them discover things they want to watch longer versions of. So again, this finding is really a core reason why our product teams continue to work to bridge shorts and YouTube Main. One of the implementations as part of this bridge is that YouTube recommendations now consider recent long form videos from channels a viewer watches in shorts. This makes it even easier for creators to find new audiences and bridge those audiences to long form content all in one place. And another cool feature I really want to highlight here is that within YouTube Studio, one of the tools you can do is you can create shorts directly from your long form videos, and clips can also be generated that appear on your channel page in search. So we're trying to make this as easy as possible. So the features we just went through are all obviously very important, but I now want to talk about the income your content can bring in. A great benefit of YouTube is our YouTube Partner Program, more commonly known as YPP. You're about to get a lot of acronyms, so buckle up. There are various criteria that is required in order to qualify for YPP. You can either get 1,000 subscribers with 4,000 valid public watch hours in the last 12 months. That would be on VOD. Or you can get 1,000 subscribers with 10 million valid public shorts views in the last 90 days. If you meet those criteria, you are eligible to apply to YPP within YouTube Studio, and you can learn more about how to apply, the steps to apply, as well as more on eligibility in our help center. If you want to write it down, that would be support.google.com/YouTube, or you can just go to google.com, search YouTube Help Center, and it'll pop right up.
Your creativity does.
Okay, so once you're part of YPP, we have a suite of monetization capabilities. Today, it's estimated that the top 1% of podcasters are generating about 99% of industry revenue, with almost all of it coming from direct sales by podcasters themselves. We're looking to change that by helping podcasters leverage new and different revenue streams with our already existing monetization tools. These include ad-based revenue, SVOD revenue, another acronym, I'll get into that one, and alternative monetization, which we often abbreviate to Altmon. So let's start with the one that you're probably the most familiar with, and that would be ad-based revenue. So video ads, which are YouTube's core focus, have higher CPMs than audio ads, meaning that you have an opportunity to increase your revenue by enabling video ads on YouTube. We have also recently launched 15-second non-skippable audio ads with 30-second audio ads in beta. These ads will likely run when we can see on the back end that a user is not physically watching either YouTube on desktop or YouTube on their phone, but instead are backgrounding in an app or on their computer. And partners will also see SVOD, that stands for, if you don't know, subscription video on demand revenue. This type of revenue is calculated from the non-music share, which is the same as any non-music video. And we've also developed an entire suite of tools beyond ads that allow you to leverage and monetize your YouTube fandom and engagement in unique ways. So these include commerce, shopping, channel memberships, paid digital goods, and this would be things like super chat and super stickers. So similarly to building your community with YouTube, monetization doesn't need to happen across platforms. We can give you a lot of different revenue streams right in one place. And I really want to make sure to call out that you can keep your host-read ads as part of your overall monetization strategy. They can stay, in your various episodes. They are considered paid product placements on YouTube, and they are fine to include as long as they abide by our sponsored content policies. So with that, I will hand it over to Emma, who will dive deeper into the product itself.
Great. Thank you so much, Erica. Hi, everybody. I'm Emma Sweet. I'm the Global Product Activation Manager for podcasts. Long title, fancy way of saying I help launch the product, and then I collect all the user feedback on the product to help improve what we do, identify bugs, feature requests, etc. One of the fun parts about my job is that I think people, when they submit feedback in the send feedback button, they think it goes nowhere. It does go somewhere, and I read all of it. So if you have any in-product feedback, leave it. But we really, really care about what our users, our podcasters think about our product and how we can improve it for them. So with that in mind, while podcasts have been on YouTube for quite a while, we've really only been investing in the product in the past 2 years or so. And I'll get into everything that we've launched so far. But the most important thing here is that we're still building. And as I mentioned, we listen to our users and our podcasters to launch what's most impactful to them. So what we've been up to recently, one, we're making improvements, particularly in YouTube Music, to better enable those audio listeners. For example, just a couple weeks ago, we launched episode sorting, so the ability to sort by oldest to newest, newest to oldest. We know this is really important for serialized podcasts and seasons. We're also working on features like Marcus Played, the ability to filter episodes by what's been played versus what hasn't been played yet, trim silence, faster playback speeds, all of these features that are familiar from other podcatcher apps that YouTube just hasn't had before. And so as we focus more on podcasts and YouTube Music, these features will be coming soon. We're also enhancing search and discovery, both within YouTube Music as well as on YouTube, what we call YouTube Main. So we've introduced podcast shelves on the YouTube Music homepage for more users globally. This has been available in the US, but it hasn't expanded globally up until now. So more users will be able to see podcasts on the Home tab and Explore tab. This hasn't been rolled out to everybody yet, so in case you don't see it, that's why, but it's coming within about the next month or so for everybody. We launched auto downloads late last year, as well as the ability to add podcasts via an RSS feed URL. And we're working on better integration support, not just within podcasts, but within the YouTube Music experience overall. In podcasts, we're particularly focused on Android Auto and on wearables, but YouTube Music more broadly will integrate with more devices this year. For example, Garmin watches are coming, and that will include both music and podcasts. So we can go to the next slide. All of these features that I mentioned, everything that we're doing, they're really focused on our two-app ecosystem between YouTube, which is focused on video consumption, And YouTube Music, which as I mentioned, is focused on audio consumption. On YouTube Main, audiences can find and consume podcasts just as they have for many years, but now it's easier. We have show and podcast badges, a dedicated destination page, official search cards, all of these features to make podcasts more visible on YouTube Main and make it easier for podcast listeners to continue consuming additional content. With YouTube Music, we've expanded a user's choice for how to consume podcasts on YouTube. All users have access to free backgrounding and downloading for easy listening on the go. And this is different from our music content where not all users can background, download, audio, video toggle, etc. With podcast content in particular, even free users have access to these features. And YouTube Main and YouTube Music sync up. If a user starts their podcast journey by watching on Main, they can pick up where they left off on YouTube Music and vice versa. On Main, we've launched features to help increase the visibility and discoverability of podcasts. As I mentioned, youtube.com/podcasts, what we call our destination page. This is now live globally. Official search cards to make it easier that when a user is searching for your podcast, this card will pop up to make it easier to find. Badging on the search and the watch pages, either with the word podcast or with the name of your show. And a podcast tab on the channel page so that when users are visiting your channel, your podcast is immediately visible alongside live, shorts, playlists, etc. But these are just the features that are visible on the front end. But the algorithmic changes that we've made behind the scenes are really what makes all the difference. We recognize that podcast content is different than other YouTube content. So for example, in serialized podcasts, users want to listen to the next episode in the playlist. So we're working to ensure that our search and discovery systems do a better job of handling these podcast to user journeys. For example, showing that next episode in Watch Next rather than a new episode or a different form of YouTube content. For example, if a user consumes podcast content, we now nominate more podcasts in Watch Next because we know that this is the most common way that users find new content to watch. We can go to the next slide. YouTube isn't just home to podcasts. And when we recommend podcast content, we recommend it alongside other video content on YouTube. This helps podcast consumers not just view your content, but YouTube users more broadly. Forgot to mention that on the last slide. Podcasts have launched in YouTube Music across the world where YouTube Music is available. So let's dive a little bit deeper into the YouTube Music experience. When you create your podcast in YouTube Studio, it not only makes your content eligible to YouTube podcast features like we just talked about with Main, but it also automatically makes it available within the YouTube Music app. We'll get in a little bit later on how to designate your podcast, create it, RSS upload, all of that. But to say, there are a few ways to get your content ready to help enable podcast discovery within the app. So first, upload evergreen show art to your podcast in Studio, that square podcast thumbnail that you're likely using on Libsyn. Then clean up the podcast playlist to be just full episodes to make it easy for users to find the correct show in YouTube Music. This is one of those best practices that we really, really view to be important. We'll find that creators will often have multiple podcasts for their single show. So they might break out seasons into separate podcasts, or they'll designate a full episodes playlist and a clips playlist as podcasts. So that then when a user goes into YouTube Music, there's 4 different versions of your podcast available within the app, which can be really confusing. And then it also dilutes your listenership across all of the different shows that you have. And so what we recommend is you really just designate one playlist as a podcast that contains full episodes of your show. Just like you're uploading your full episodes to Libsyn as MP3 files, that's your podcast. We recommend doing the same exact thing on YouTube. We do recommend, of course, clips and shorts, and we can get into those best practices. But when it comes to what's designated as a podcast, this is really what we recommend. Lastly, make sure your podcast name is exactly what your show is named on Libsyn. We do sometimes find that creators will want to say Emma's Podcast Full Episodes as the name of it. It doesn't look good in YouTube Music, and it also makes it harder to find. With podcasting, it's really about consistency. You want your users to be able to find your show exactly as it is, wherever it lives. And so just use the name of your show, and then a user will know to search it and be able to find it really easily. So podcasts are surfaced across a variety of areas in YouTube Music. First, we have dedicated podcast discovery pages. If a user clicks the podcast chip at the top of home or on the Explore page, they'll be able to see a filtered podcast experience with various shelves. These shelves include the shows that they subscribe to, new episodes of the shows in their library, recommended episodes, recommended shows by genre, all of the things that we're familiar with. Within search, users can also filter search results by either podcast shows or episodes to help them more easily focus and find what they're seeking. They're also able to follow shows and add them to their library. There's a new episodes playlist where they can see all of the new episodes of the shows in their library, as well as dig into the full catalog of the shows that they love most. And then lastly, the audio video experience. I mentioned earlier that all users, free users included, are able to toggle between audio and video within the YouTube Music app already. They're also able to background podcasts and download podcasts. So this is an experience that's consistent with how podcasts are consumed in other platforms. So Erica did touch on monetization, but I do just want to mention audio ads because they're relatively new. So today we have 15-second non-skippable audio ads with 30-second audio ads currently in beta. We are testing this and hopefully we'll have it rolled out in the near future. As Erica mentioned, monetization for podcasts is exactly how you'd monetize your other YouTube content today. Same policies apply. Just to reiterate one more time, host-read ads are allowed. They're considered paid product placements, and they can remain in videos as long as they abide by our policies. It's really with the burned-in or the third-party ads that does not allow with our policies, so just keep an eye out there. And both video and audio ads have the opportunity to run on content. So with video ads, this really just determines of how a user is consuming your content. If they're watching the video, they'll be served a video ad. If their screen is locked and they're backgrounding, they'll be served an audio ad. So that's really the only difference, is just, am I a user who's watching or listening? Will I be served a video or an audio ad? So then let's get into the important part for all of you, which is how to create a podcast on YouTube. Number one, make sure you have a YouTube channel. So this video here, we won't go over it today, but feel free to watch afterwards on how to start your channel and kind of get everything set up. That's, first and foremost what you need to do. Then next comes the actual podcast upload. So there's two ways to do this. First is what we call show creation, and the second, which is our newer feature, is RSS upload. If you're a video-first podcast creator, we recommend using show creation. This is either creating a new podcast playlist in Studio or taking an existing playlist and designating it as podcast content. But if you're an audio-first creator who doesn't have the resourcing, the bandwidth, the desire to do video, there is now a solution for you, and that's this RSS upload. So let's dive into each of these. So this GIF shows how to create a new podcast. And so this is if you don't already have your podcast content uploaded on your channel, but you're doing videos, you're going to start uploading video, or you're interested in exploring that option. So all you need to do here is input the details like your podcast title, your description, your visibility, and your square podcast thumbnail. As podcasters on Libsyn, you should already have all of this information on hand. And I'd recommend just doing the same thing that you have on Libsyn within YouTube Studio as well. Now, if you already have a playlist for your podcast, you don't need to do this like create new podcast flow that was shown on the last slide. Instead, what you can do is you can go to the playlist tab and click on that three-dot menu and click set as podcast. And this will designate it for you. Main thing to be mindful of here is that when you convert a playlist to a podcast, review the content within that. So as I mentioned, we really look for that singular podcast playlist with just full episodes. So today, if that playlist has clips, content from other channels, anything that's not just full episodes of your podcast, we'd recommend removing that from the playlist before you then set it as a podcast. The other thing here is that if you don't have it already, you will need to just upload your Square podcast show art in this process. As I mentioned in Q4 of last year, we launched RSS upload on YouTube Studio to make it easier for RSS first creators to distribute their show. So let's actually go to the next slide sorry, the GIF isn't done, but I do think that this helps touch on some of the differences between RSS today on Libsyn versus what it's like on YouTube Studio. So TLDR, most simply, what YouTube does is we take your RSS feed, and for each episode within your RSS feed, we upload a static image video on your behalf. If you learn anything from this, this is like the number one most important thing. We want to make it easy for you to just submit your RSS feed to us. We will do all of the work for you there and upload static image videos for each of your episodes. So now let's go through each of the steps here. So first, which you're very familiar with, if you're a podcaster, you're uploading your MP3 files to Libsyn. Libsyn still is the source of truth. It's where your MP3 files live. It's where all of your metadata lives. That's all consistent with how it is today. Libsyn then generates your RSS feed. You can pull that from Libsyn, again, consistent with how it operates today. Here's where it starts to get different. So then you're going to go into YouTube Studio, and in that create menu in the upper right-hand corner, when you hit create podcast, you'll see the option to upload your RSS feed to YouTube. So you do today need to go into YouTube Studio in order to upload your RSS feed to YouTube. Then you'll go through each of the upload steps. So you'll input your details, you'll check off the visibility of your content, you'll sign terms of service, like all of those sorts of things are automatically in the upload flow. And then after that, once you hit publish and flip it to public, new episodes will automatically be published to YouTube on your behalf. One small note here is that because we're taking that MP3 file and we're turning it into a video file, it might take a little bit longer for your episodes to get uploaded on YouTube than it does on an audio first platform. Then the other thing I would note here is that we host your content, which means that your RSS feed does need to be ads free, which Libsyn can help with. Again, we've mentioned it a couple times. Host read, sponsorships, promotions, etc. that can stay in your content. It's third-party ads that don't abide by our sponsored content policies. Then lastly here, so sorry, Erica, if we go back. Lastly here on the right, there's a couple other differences between how it operates on YouTube versus how it operates elsewhere. So here's what we will do. We will automatically publish new episodes. And if you make changes on your RSS feed to your episode titles and descriptions, we'll make those changes too. So we rely on the RSS feed as the source of truth. What we won't do is that if you have to re-upload your audio to Libsyn for some reason, you've made a mistake or something's updated, we will not automatically update that on YouTube. And the reason for that is, again, we're uploading a video on your behalf. You can't overwrite a YouTube video today. Same thing with this content. So what you can do is you can go into YouTube Studio, and there is an option to re-upload the audio for your content there. And what that does is it takes the prior episode, brings it private, and uploads a new video as public. And the reason why we do that is so you don't lose your analytics from the prior video. You do have to manually combine them, but we make sure that your analytics stay within YouTube Studio in case you want to keep them, maintain them for your records. Then the other piece that we won't do is that if you want, you can actually update the episode title and description on YouTube. We won't then overwrite it with what's on the RSS feed. We recognize that sometimes creators want to have different descriptions or more YouTube-y content. And so if you make that change on YouTube, we will honor that you made the change on YouTube. And now one of our newest features is that our YouTube API now supports podcasts. So this is brand new. It's still very early days of testing. But with the YouTube API, we are looking to better integrate YouTube with Libsyn and with your hosting platform in general. So today you can use Libsyn to create a podcast, set a playlist as a podcast, upload custom thumbnails for either your podcast show or your episodes, as well as surface analytics. And I should say, I don't know, Elsie, you'd have to correct me if it's actually available today or if we're still kind of in the early stages, but if not today, then soon. But before I pass it over to Elsie to tell you more about the Libsyn integration, I just want to overview this chart on the right. So as I mentioned, this isn't available for RSS upload quite yet. That is something that we are interested in doing, but for today, it's just for this video creation, show creation tool that we covered. And what we're doing is that in the before, you would have to go on YouTube separately, do all of the steps that I just outlined. But now what we're looking to do is that you can do everything through Libsyn. And you can have your show then available on YouTube, and those analytics can then be resurfaced through Libsyn so that you'll be able to see your YouTube analytics alongside your other analytics that you get from other platforms. So now I'll pass it over to Elsie to tell you more.
Yay. First of all, y'all, you are like the most prolific question askers we've ever seen. We are like, what is happening here? Anyway, many questions. Thank you so much. We will do our best to answer them. Now, in terms of Libsyn, the majority of the things that Emma was just talking about, they are already available within Libsyn, almost all of them. So yes, you can create a podcast for, obviously, a podcast as a Libsyn, as a host. Yes, we do that. You can integrate your YouTube analytics with your regular data reporting. So if you already have the channel set up, you can definitely see all of the YouTube stats inside of the Libsyn interface, which is so cool because also Libsyn is IAB certified, which means that those downloads are counted as IAB downloads within the platform. So if you happen to have to report those numbers to anybody else, you're able to provide verified numbers, especially if you have collected that data there. Now, you only get that data if you publish from Libsyn as the source of truth, as Emma said, in order for you to get that data back. If you are not connected, if you are not publishing from Libsyn to YouTube and are only publishing on YouTube, you are not getting that data back into the Libsyn interface. You can see that data in YouTube. So you do have that information there. You can set a playlist as a podcast yes, you can do that inside. I've done that before, or actually Brian did that before, our YouTube dude here and an amazing video producer. And the thing that is coming soon is actually uploading custom thumbnails for playlists and episodes. So yes, you can actually have a unique thumbnail to your podcasts in the way that I've been publishing the feed, the official Libsyn podcast, to our channel. So you guys can actually go check it out right now and see what they look like. They all have different thumbnails. I upload it and it comes out. What we don't have is the ability to change the custom thumbnail for the playlist inside of YouTube currently. All of that stuff is being worked on. It should be available fairly quickly after this event. Stay tuned for that information. But yeah, all of that stuff is happening behind the scenes there and easy to do it. By the way, just a FYI, y'all, we've been connected and publishing to YouTube since November 2013. That's wackadoodle. So since November 2013, we have been publishing the audio into YouTube as a video for a long time. Anyway, that is it. Thanks so much for giving me the floor and take it away.
Yeah. You might be one of the earliest adopters of podcasts that we've ever seen, if we could give an award for that. So as Elsie mentioned, you may not be able to see your YouTube analytics in Libsyn if you're not doing that integration. But outside of that, YouTube Studio and YouTube Analytics offers a robust amount of analytics. I used to be a podcaster myself, and YouTube just is, in my opinion, although I am biased, best in class in analytics. And so
kudos, because I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed with the data and the behind the scenes of YouTube. Just letting you know, because I'm like,
we actually sometimes hear that it's too good. Like it's as a creator, it can be a little jarring and disappointing to see exactly what your audience is dropping off or where they, turn on your content. But, I think it is really helpful for being able to see one of the metrics that I really love is that now, and we did this late last year where we integrated podcasts into other content your audience watches. So you'll be able to see what other podcast content, what other YouTube content that viewers of your content are consuming on the platform, which is super helpful because I feel like a lot of us know, oh, my podcast is similar to these other ones, but do people actually watch other podcasts? Or maybe you'll be surprised at what your audience is also interested in. And it can help tailor your content as well as help with, maybe I should do, a host swap with another podcast or guest on there or, something like that. And so analytics, in addition to that, you get views, watch time, average view duration, key moments in your show where users were most engaged, your traffic sources, what were your top episodes, your overall podcast metrics, really everything that you have access to with YouTube is integrated with podcasts as well. The other thing that you can do within advanced mode is see how your views are broken out from YouTube main and YouTube music. We don't have the ability to split your revenue, like see where revenue is coming from YouTube main versus YouTube music, but you can do this for views, which can still be helpful. So I'm going to give a couple slide overview on channel management, some of the best practices based on questions we receive, and then we'll flip over to Q&A. So branding, super, super important for YouTube. I think one of the main pieces of advice I give is that a lot of people believe that you can just drop your podcast onto YouTube and it's a set it and forget it. And unfortunately, it's not. YouTube is another living and breathing platform, just like any other podcast platform is. Just like you want to do promotion for your podcast more broadly, you also want to promote your YouTube channel and have it be a cohesive experience that a viewer would really enjoy being on. So that involves a channel banner to help highlight your credentials or preview your content style, add a tone and a visual identity to your channel. Your channel avatar. This is your signature image that represents your channel. This is what's visible to users most often. And so this is also really important to have something that represents you, your identity, and your brand. You can do channel trailers, which is a short video that's displayed up top to give especially unsubscribed viewers a little bit of a hint into what your channel covers. This could be a really great place to put a clip from one of your podcasts that has resonated really well with your audience, or do some sort of like fun trailer content for your show. I'd recommend using this just as a way to let viewers in. And then playlist shelves, which help organize your content and give viewers a direct source to all of the different forms of content on your channel. So your shorts, playlists, live, podcasts, really everything there. We recommend using that. So one tip here is that if your podcast is established, which I'm guessing almost all of you are, if you use your current branding and imagery, this makes it really easy for audiences to recognize this as your official YouTube channel in addition to your podcast. And so you don't really have to go necessarily far out of the box for YouTube. A lot of this stuff already exists. I know a lot of podcasters have websites that they use. They have this banner content in addition to their show art. Use this and leverage this for YouTube because that cohesive brand identity across platforms can be really helpful. And then the last thing I would emphasize here is that podcasts are playlists. I think this is an area of confusion for many, even internally, of like, how is a podcast different than a playlist? It's not, honestly. In the back end, they are exactly the same thing. They're just called something different. And it's all a part of this effort to make podcasts more visible on YouTube. I guess the only difference I would highlight is that podcasts get put into YouTube Music and playlists generally don't. And podcasts also have a variety of features that we just talked about, where you do need to have your content designated as a podcast to get access to the badging, the destination page eligibility, the discovery features for podcast consumers, really everything that we've been talking about. But what's important here is that this is a playlist. So it operates like a playlist. It monetizes like you do with your other VODs. It's really not that exceptionally different, except that it unlocks more features for you. And I don't think I need to cover all the text, but feel free to read. But why don't we maybe get into some questions? I do just want to do a quick preview of resources that you can access after, and then that we are doing office hours. So Erica and I and Elsie, I believe, will be on hand for office hours for Libsyn creators to be able to answer further questions, cover additional topics, go a little bit deeper. Today was really just a starting out session of why YouTube, our best practices, our product overview. But if there are particular topics of interest, we're happy to cover and go deep.
Great. Now, before we start with the Q&As, I just want to let you know that you'll be getting a really quick little feedback email after this event. And we would really so appreciate you sharing what you thought about the presentation and also other topics that you'd like the YouTube team to address. They are really looking forward to that. So if you'll get an email, so don't go looking for it right now. It'll be going out. Promise. Super easy. Just type something up, send it back, let us know. And we are going to kind of do a little bit of Q&As here. I'm going to do my very best, folks, to keep us focused on YouTube and podcasts. versus YouTube strategy growth overall. Okay, because that's a whole other conversation. And so I want to this is the YouTube podcast team is here. Hence, we are going to talk about YouTube and podcasts. So as best as we can for this stuff. So I'm going to go look at some of the holy crap questions that we've got going on in here, and we'll see. Give me a moment. Let me just look over here.
Elsie,
Yeah.
I just want to add in, there are two awesome channels on YouTube by YouTube for general creator YouTube questions, the YouTube Creators channel and the Creator Insider channel. YouTube Creators especially is full of educational content across YouTube, custom thumbnails, channel strategy, branding, all of that. And so if there's anything that Eric and I don't have time to answer today, particularly on that point of we are the podcast team, those two channels are really, really great resources for content.
And
Perfect.
in addition, also want to say, in addition to that, the Help Center, which I called out earlier about YPP's far from being the only thing in there. So definitely if you have any questions, search them in the Help Center, and there's a high likelihood it'll get answered in there as well.
Great. Fabulous. So, Erica, I'm going to make sure that I answer some of the questions that y'all want to push forward a little bit, and then I'll keep looking at some of the other stuff there. So let's go ahead and start with our very first question. Let me see. So this is a question. So we've just been uploading our podcasts as videos, not using the show creation / designate as a podcast feature. Does that matter? So they haven't created playlists on that.
And Emma, I'll start, and if you want to add anything on, be my guest. So yes, the short answer is yes, it very much so does matter. A big reason why it matters is if you're not designated as a podcast, number one, you'll only show up in YouTube main. You won't show up in YouTube music. That's first and foremost. Second, there's a lot of other things happening on the back end in terms of algorithm and different features that you won't get if you're not looked at as a podcast, or if you're not marked off as a podcast. Our backend system won't recognize you as a podcast. So you won't be shared with, let's say, podcast first users or people listening to more audio first content on the platform. So you're really getting a ton of added benefits by marking, your podcast off as a podcast. And you're missing out on all of those if you don't.
Yeah. The only thing I would add to that, because I feel like my slide flub maybe missed it. Just because you designate as a podcast doesn't mean that we're only going to show your episodes to podcast first consumers. We will focus on podcast consumers because those consumers on YouTube prefer, they'll sit down and watch content for a long period of time, content that has high watch time. That's podcast content to us. We want those viewers who we know are interested in podcasts to be able to see more podcasts, but that doesn't mean that your content then will never be showed to other viewers on YouTube. We have, again, as Erica said, over 2 billion monthly logged in users. You're going to get seen by, our vast global audience.
Yeah. That's a lot. Okay, moving on here to another question. Are you able to upload to YouTube Music versus via RSS feed without also being uploaded via RSS feed on main, RSS on main YouTube?
So the short answer there is no. But background is you want to be on both, main and music. There's different features on both. I will say YouTube Music is wonderful and acts more as while it's not a podcatcher, it acts more like a podcatcher than YouTube main. However, YouTube main is really where the crux of those 2 billion monthly logged users are. So your audience is going to become much more vast by being on both platforms.
Yeah. The other thing I would add there that we didn't touch on is the benefit of Living Room. So Living Room is YouTube on TV, and that has been our fastest growing service over the course of, I think, a few years. That's from main. That's not YouTube Music, that's main. And what we see with podcasting is that it's also, I can't share specific numbers, but it is a very fast growing surface for podcast content in particular. And the reason is that people like to put a podcast on TV and then basically use it as backgrounding and kind of use it as a radio and go about cooking, cleaning, all of that. They just like to be able to view it on the big screen as well. And so uploading to main also carries that benefit of it's not just desktop, it's not just YouTube Music, it's living room, it's wherever users are consuming YouTube.
Yeah, there's another. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's something so nostalgic about living room. It's kind of like, I don't know, waking up in high school and like putting on the Today Show or, another news morning program. It kind of has a similar feel. And I think, that's a reason. I know I personally watch on living room. So it's definitely, I think, a reason why it draws a ton of attention.
Oh, for sure. And then the young ones, like I have younger kids, they tend to watch YouTube on the big screen. Like that's how they watch a lot of the YouTube in the evenings and whatnot. So they're kind of used to going that route and they'll discover content there and just put it on. Right. Okay, here's another question. Oh, sorry.
Cutting. I was going to say, with so many people cord cutting and no longer having cable, I feel like, that's another reason that living room numbers are only going to continue to grow.
Oh, absolutely. Here's another question that we get all the time, folks. So the podcast is already on YouTube as YouTube video, right? You've got your podcast as YouTube video, but it does not appear on YouTube Music. So what do I need to do is the question.
This is a great culmination of the last two questions we just answered. What's going on here is you're not marked as a podcast. If your podcasts are not in a playlist, you would need to put them in a playlist and designated the playlist as a podcast. Or maybe they're already in a playlist and you just need to mark it as a podcast, as Emma went through. But the TLDR here is it's not showing up in YouTube Music because you are not marked as a podcast.
Yeah. Yep. Resources on that slide have the Help Center articles for show creation in particular, which has the steps for each of that. So please feel free to refer to that.
Yeah. So on that note, though, here's a question. So can they get a download of the presentation slides? If not, where can they find it? And or would you suggest for people to just like stop the screen and take a screenshot?
Well, this presentation will be able to be rewatched on YouTube. So you can come back in that manner and rewatch again, pause, screenshot, do whatever you have to do. And then I recommend going to all the resources that, we discussed, throughout this presentation.
Yeah.
We'll make sure resource links get sent since the screenshot isn't going to help with that.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So I've got, okay. So this one I can kind of add, I'm just going to clarify. This question is about, I have over 30,000 views in 1 week on my latest in quote podcast episode on YouTube. Will that be counting towards downloads on Libsyn? And as I mentioned before, if you had your destination set up prior to that and you publish from Libsyn to YouTube, yes, that's going to come back into our stats inside of the Libsyn interface. That said, though, it doesn't get aggregated to your existing stats as a whole, meaning it's not just you're not gonna look at the number and let's say you had 100 downloads and you have 50 from YouTube and now your downloads are gonna show 150. It's still gonna show 100. And then there's another section that has the YouTube stats there. So you do have to do a little bit of manual addition, if you will, to figure that out whenever that happens. And so there's that aspect of it all. But if you're just publishing on YouTube, you're not going to see that inside of the Libsyn interface if you've done it in just that one place. I'm trying to make sure. Go ahead. Yes.
I was going to say a podcast download is not a YouTube view, which is why they'll show up as two separate things. We are integrated, but still distinct.
Yes. So here's a question from Your Money, Your Wealth. And they said, will it be possible to add cards, transcripts, and screen elements and schedule the podcast to publish to YouTube via Libsyn in advance? And so I think that this is a two-person answer, or like your team and our team. We can only support what YouTube supports in order for us to do that. And therefore, that could be a request for the YouTube team. For the future.
Exactly. Well, if there's interest in that, as I mentioned, I collect all the feedback. So please let Elsie know, because we do want to make sure that this is a very usable experience for all of you. You can do all of that on YouTube today, but in the initial stages of this API integration, you won't be able to do that through Libsyn.
This question, I think, does kind of bridge on the strategy side a little bit here, and I don't know enough data to know this, but maybe you can answer this question. This is from Parks and Cons owner and editor in charge. They said, we stopped publishing our podcast in the podcast tab playlist because views on our other videos dropped to almost zero. Is there a way to upload podcasts as podcasts without affecting video stats?
So your stats should not be, number one, I'm sorry that happened, but your
Yes.
stats, there is not a direct correlation there. Unfortunately, I'm not talking to you face to face, so I can't ask any of the subsequent questions I would normally ask, such as, I don't know how many times you're uploading a day. I don't know your upload cadence. There's different things there, where we would recommend. I would say you just potentially don't want to overload with a ton of different content 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week, whatever it might be. So I would really just watch your upload cadence and patterns there. But your audio, your videos, like your podcast should not be taking away from the videos on your other, on your channel, from both a numbers perspective and a content perspective.
Yep. This is another question in terms of production that I think that maybe we can talk a little bit into. This is from Saga Ringmar. Is it worth creating a YouTube video podcast with just captions and graphics, aka what we're currently doing? Or are there benefits only worth it if you include video of the hosts themselves?
So there are kind of tiers here. Like the basic would be, uploading your content. A true audio on YouTube would be uploading your content and just like putting your background image would be your show art or just another static image. What you're doing with captions and graphics is like the middle tier. So there's definitely added benefit, and we've seen it in terms of numbers, as a leg up from just using, audio as I described before. However, we do see even an additional benefit in including the hosts themselves. So if you are having like a really host-centric podcast and you can throw a camera in, whether it's even on Zoom or an iPhone camera, whatever it may be, I would recommend trying and testing that format out and seeing where it nets out, because there is definitely a benefit, as we went through in the presentation, to really seeing a face and getting, someone's personality and that more personal connection in that manner.
Oh, yeah, for sure. This one comes up a lot. This question is from Your Money, Your Wealth. Is there any difference in discoverability strategy from music versus main?
No, I would say not necessarily. So as I mentioned, you do want the name of your show and your episodes to be consistent generally, so it's more findable. But we do see that creators will experiment, particularly because of main, with changing up some of the episode titles. YouTube has its own way of operating sometimes that is even a mystery to us. We're having some of those keywords in the episode titles and all of that can help. People use emojis in their episode titles, like they kind of run the gamut. However, I would say that as, again, once being a podcaster, you want good keywords in your episode titles, no matter where your podcast is, because people are going to search often by topic or keyword and you want them to be able to find it. So it's not a requirement. It's more just, do you find that for your channel in particular, you see differences in descriptions and things like that work for you? I actually think where the discoverability can come in for main is through custom thumbnails. And again, this is not a requirement. It's kind of that next step. But Mr. Beast, of course, being a huge YouTube creator, has been one of our early testers of A/B thumbnail creation and has found that it's been really helpful for him. I believe we are rolling out that A/B testing for thumbnails this year, if I'm not mistaken, where you'll be able to kind of test the different thumbnails and how they work and see what works best. Custom thumbnails can work really well to drawing a viewer's eye into your content. And you do that at the episode level, not at the show level. But I think that's a really good way to enhance discoverability. That focuses a little bit more on main, since that's where people are really kind of like eyes first clicking around. But those thumbnails then carry over to music as well. And so they're integrated, but that might be a way that you might want to focus a little bit more. But generally, I would say if you keep things consistent and they're discoverable by podcast audiences, you're good to go.
This is a question from the Southern Fork, and they're asking, I already have a Libsyn integration, so podcast is automatically published each week. How do I add images or video to that? Currently, just logo and audio. So once the show is published and on YouTube, then all of whatever you do for it needs to go into YouTube. So you can change the thumbnail. That's about the extent of what you can change there. To be able to change your thumbnail, you can't do that within the Libsyn interface because it's like a one road. It's just a one-way road, if you will, in that sense. And in terms of adding video, you would have to publish video as in like actual human video that you're watching right now with people to publish it that way, because at a core, it is a video that's going into YouTube right now. That is a YouTube video, but it is audio only. It's like just audio with a plate, right? So even though the file, it's a video, there is really just a plate that people listen to. And I know that I've seen a lot of questions going in there that doesn't make any sense. Like, why should I put that video up there? It's a visual platform. I don't know. I cannot tell you how many people are listening to YouTube, just listening, not watching anything. One of them being my husband. I cannot get him to listen to a podcast on a podcast app. He's a YouTube all the way, hardcore. It's on all the time. And he listens on YouTube, music, audio, podcasts, all everything. He's YouTube centric. So you are not losing anything by putting it out there. Now I'm going to just switch again to another question that comes right after that, which I think aligns with this. The space between asks, should we be using the RSS if we are already dropping the video podcast on the platform? Does that help?
Another great question.
Yes.
No, don't upload twice. Keep your video up and running. All of our products are really to meet users where they are and make everything easy for all of you. But no, we don't want your RSS feed or the RSS feature to cannibalize your video feature. And as we've said, the video podcast typically does better because even if someone just wants to listen, they can background on desktop or within YouTube Music.
The other thing I would add to that Erica's completely right. The only case in which we would recommend doing both is if you have gaps to fill. So if you are a video creator who does it for most of your episodes, but you can't do all of them, or I know somebody asked a question of like, sometimes I have guests that aren't comfortable with being on camera. We do still think it's worth, as Erica was talking about, doing that middle ground of like, you're on camera, but they're an avatar or sound waves or whatever that is, that still works. But if it's not possible to do video for every single episode, what you can do is you can use RSS upload and switch the default visibility to private. So that then when you have gaps to fill that the video episode isn't on YouTube, you can turn that individual episode to public so that you still have a cohesive podcast with all of your episodes. It's just that you're using the RSS uploaded episode to fill in so you're not missing an episode in your overall podcast playlist. This is a very specific use case. That's the only one that we recommend, but generally just do one or the other.
Yep. So we have a ton of questions that are all about strategy. And I hear you all, but we're not going to go into those. If you do want to know about hashtags, search optimization, how to grow your channel to 1,000 people, all of those things, how to figure out what your stats actually say. I know that there's help desk articles and or drop it in the chat and the YouTube team will look at that and maybe craft something to help you guys for all of that stuff there. Go ahead, Emma.
Sorry to interrupt you, Elsie. What we can do, as I mentioned, in these office hours, we want them to be helpful. And so where Eric and I can't always answer certain YouTube channel strategy questions, we obviously have colleagues who can. And so if there is interest in a broader, just like how to best optimize any content on YouTube session, we can bring someone in to lead a session on that. And it sounds like there's interest to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Shorts questions are coming up. Yeah, go ahead.
And what I also want to say at a high level in terms of getting just to growing your channel, whether that's to 5 subscribers or 10 million subscribers, consistency is really key. And even with some of the biggest YouTubers, podcasters you see on the platform. Like, success really didn't happen overnight. So continue to post, continue to upload. Authenticity always comes through. So upload what you love and what feels really like organic and happy and good to you, and you'll continue to do well. You just gotta, continue to work at it, and also test different things. Like, see what different formats work, see what doesn't work, look at the numbers, post more of what works, and take back less of what doesn't work. That would be my best advice at a very high level there.
I have two things to add to that. Sorry, I know we're already over time. Number one, because I saw some questions around short segments, like, should we be doing this? The best success that we see amongst podcasters is ones who really embrace the platform. So today, a lot of podcasters post clips of their show to TikTok, to Reels, post them on Shorts, use the linking tool to link your Shorts to your full episodes, do segments on your channel. I only recommended doing it for full episodes for designation, but you can still have playlists of clips from your podcast for viewers who want to watch the clips instead of the longer form content. Live is another great way where we've seen podcasters, particularly over COVID, go live virtually and do a live recording. Do that on YouTube. Don't do it on a third-party platform. Do it on YouTube for your audience. That's another way. The community tab, like, there are so many different areas of YouTube to really dive into and explore that I think a lot of podcasters do today on other platforms. They're doing it on third parties or Instagram and TikTok, etc. YouTube has that all for you. So really dive in and embrace the platform, and that just helps your channel grow. The other thing is that I think as a podcaster, it can be a little uncomfortable to put a more raw version of your episode on YouTube. Video editing is not as feasible in some ways as audio editing, where you can remove every like, whatever that is. You don't have to do that for YouTube. Audiences will still view that as authentic and enjoy watching your content. So even if it's not as crisp as your audio might be, that is okay. It comes across authentically and it does well on YouTube anyway. And so don't let that be a barrier to entry.
Yeah, I actually have one podcast that I watch that's called So Bad It's Good. And, he goes live not live, but he actually just uploads a very kind of raw video with very little editing and just puts it up. And then he does a really beautiful job editing the audio piece and putting that out as his podcast episodes. And thus you have a separate experience of both of those things, right? And it really, I think, helps him grow his YouTube channel with the podcast and knowing there's an audio version, but the audio version is actually optimized for the audio consumption. Now, I know that you all have so much work to do already publishing things out there. So you do pick and choose the things that are based on your goals, what kind of goals you have for your show, what kind of goals you have as a publisher, to be able to know where you should invest your time and attention. So there's no magic bullet here, y'all. Y'all gonna have to work. Get to know the platform, get to know your audio, what's the best workflow for you. There is no one hit wonder where everything's gonna be magically optimized for every platform that you go to. Now, I just wanna shout out Jim Harold here before we start to close it up here. We have just a couple of minutes. He asks a question and he says, I currently have a podcast on my main YouTube channel, but want to move it to the podcast playlist, okay, to another channel. Is this possible?
So there is different playlist linking you can do, but if you wanted to live completely on the other channel, you would have to re-upload it to that other channel. I'm trying to, I would love to know why you want to do this and what's the reasoning there to really give you my best advice on whether I think you should keep it or move it over. But I would say it is, to move it, just to physically move the video and have it be owned, quote unquote, by the other channel. That is not possible, no.
Yeah. Do you have, what would he have to search for that linking thing that you mentioned for the,
The help center, it should definitely all be in there. And that is something you can look into and do. And that is also something, we could probably further go over in, an office hour session.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Awesome. So listen, folks, we are going to wrap it up because if not, we're going to be here all day. Just FYI. And we could be. And so first, keep putting in the comments. If you're watching now, if you're watching later, put in the comments some things that you really want the YouTube podcast team to answer for you, because I think it's super helpful for them to know. Second of all, you're going to be getting an email in about 5 minutes if you are here live in your email box asking for feedback. So if you have feedback, write it all in there. If you can only give us an emoji to tell us if you liked it or you didn't like it or whatever, and we are open to whatever feedback you have, please send it on over there. Stay tuned for TBD times. All of you who signed up for this will get a little notification depending upon what happens on with the office hours and all of that stuff. But here's the thing, y'all. If you want questions answered, you're going to have to ask a question. We're not going to just show up for just randomly hanging out. So you have a question, ask a question when you're asked to ask a question. Thank you so much again, YouTube for Podcasts. You all are amazing. Thank you, Erica. Thank you, Emma. Thank you to the entire team for supporting podcasters in such a wonderful way. Thank you so much for supporting Libsyn and for having us put this on. We are so thrilled to see you. And stay tuned for our next live next month, which is going to be all about AI and podcasting. Or that's going to be, oh my God. So thank you so much. Let us know. Give us your feedback. That would be amazing. Bye. Thank you so much.